Thank you for being here tonight. It is really my pleasure to be here, not only because I am sharing this stage with my dear friend, Helen Derbyshire. My name is Alejandro Gonzalez, by the way, member of the Steering Committee, Civil Society, the same situation here that my friend Helen. And we are, I'm only honored because of that, but also because I'm going to have, as well as Helen, the opportunity to actually present the Open Government Regional Awards, which is great because this is what OGP is all about at the end of the day. Having a platform that empowers reformers from around the world who are actually changing people's lives by applying in practice what we preach in OGP in theory, which is great. We're also going to be presenting the results of OGP early initiatives, which is also an interesting piece of what we have tonight, okay? Helen.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Bonsoir, buenas tardes, good evening. Yes, it is already evening, but we've got lots of exciting things still to come. It's the beginning of what's going to be a long evening, I think. The theme for our award ceremony tonight is Making Transparency Count. And the reformers you're going to hear from, both the awards winners and the people who are telling stories about early results of their reform initiatives, do just that. They take open government beyond the concept of just transparency and look at how it can have an impact. Because once informed, citizens can get involved. And then participation can take place, and that can result in problem solving and hence in improved service delivery. Our exciting examples will include fighting corruption in Italy and improved water services in Mongolia.
And the winners actually were already announced during the opening ceremony, if you can remember, yesterday. But what is going to be different and relevant and interesting today is that we're going to have the opportunity to actually hear the stories from those who were responsible to actually implementing them. And shall we start with the first one?
Let's go.
Let's go. I think the first one, it's the case from the region of the Americas. And I'm very proud to announce this prize because it is from Mexico, which was the winner. And I'm from Mexico. Yeah, you round of applause, please. Come on, guys. Venga, bring it down. It's late, but this is important, okay? And it is the Budget Transparency Portal. And I'm really, believe me, I know very well this initiative because I was in the inception of this initiative, but of course it's a responsibility of the Ministry of Finance. But it was conceived and developed in a co-creation manner with civil society organizations. And I'm very, very happy that a number of years after, within the OGP initiative, it's being recognized. The organization that originally proposed the Ministry of Finance of Mexico with the Portal Transparency, the Budget Portal Transparency was Fundar. It's an organization that is our colleague in Mexico. But today, to receive this award, I'm going to introduce to my dear friend, Jose Angel Mejia from the Ministry of Finance, to actually tell us the story on how you develop and what is. Come on here, of course, come here and tell us the story about it. Tell us, Jose Angel. You can have this if you want. And
do you need?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have slides. Well, good afternoon. I feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish, so I will do my presentation in my own language. So, muchas gracias, Alejandro, por la presentación. Y es un gusto estar aquí y sobre todo un gusto compartir con ustedes, y lo digo humildemente, también aprender de todos ustedes. Estamos acostumbrados a vivir en un entorno en donde vemos en todos lados crecimiento. Crece la población, crecen las ciudades, crece la infraestructura y también, ¿por qué no decirlo?, también crecen los problemas. Pero ¿qué hay de hacer de todos estos elementos en continuo crecimiento un elemento común a todos nosotros? Y en la Secretaría de Hacienda en México creemos que no solo se puede, sino que debe hacerse de manera conjunta. ¿Cómo hacerlo? vinculando, asociando estos elementos en crecimiento con la cada vez más creciente voz de la ciudadanía. Como ustedes saben, y pueden estar familiarizados con muchas plataformas de geolocalización alrededor del mundo, pero ¿qué elementos hay o se pueden destacar que pueden ser de innovación en esta plataforma? Primero, los fundamentos. Pocas veces nos preguntamos de dónde proviene la información o los datos que estamos utilizando. Es muy importante considerar que para mapear cualquier tema necesitamos la información. Y tal vez uno de los temas y problemas más importantes en cualquier política de transparencia es la falta de información. Por ello es vital contar con esta. Por eso desde 2013 nos dimos a la tarea de poner a disposición del público en general información relacionada con las finanzas públicas de los gobiernos subnacionales en diferentes formatos, desde diferentes ángulos. Y en un país como México, la calidad de la información con 32 estados que integran el país y más de 2.400 municipios es un tema y un reto importante. Por ello nos dimos a la tarea de cambiar las normas, modificar el marco normativo para establecer estándares de información homogéneos y también reconstruimos los sistemas de información para el reporte de los avances. De esta manera, la información que se reporta de manera interna puede ser ya disponible de manera externa y por definición, por default, ya es un sistema abierto. El segundo elemento, la cultura. No solo es necesario contar con un marco normativo y unos sistemas sólidos, también es importante contar con una cultura que esté orientada a los resultados, ¿no? Al final de cuentas, quien implementa la política son las instituciones y las personas. Por ello, nos hemos dado la tarea de capacitar a más de 15,000 servidores públicos en el tema de homogeneización de la información, de estandarización de datos y de monitoreo, así como en evaluación del desempeño y seguimiento. En esta tarea nos acompañó directamente nuestra organización firmante del compromiso de la Alianza para el Gobierno Abierto, el Instituto Mexicano para la Competitividad, el IMCO. Tercer elemento, la dimensión. En esta plataforma que ustedes pueden ver en pantalla, es posible encontrar más de 125,000 proyectos de inversión, así como acciones de desarrollo social a cargo de los gobiernos subnacionales, solamente para 2016. Y desde 2013 a la fecha pueden encontrarse más de 500,000 proyectos y acciones sociales. Cada trimestre, 4,000 personas a lo largo de toda la República Mexicana actualizan el avance financiero y físico de estos proyectos. Y a partir de 2016 hemos incorporado información de los contratos de algunos de estos proyectos, de tal forma que de enero a septiembre de este año es factible y es posible encontrar información de más de 50,000 de estos contratos. Cooperación, cooperación y cooperación va a ser el elemento tal vez más importante que encontremos en nuestra plataforma. Cooperación con las organizaciones de la sociedad civil que como Fundar ayudaron al diseño de esta plataforma y como INCO que han ayudado a mejorar la información. Solamente quisiera terminar diciendo tres de los grandes retos o más bien resultados que hemos encontrado con el desarrollo de esta plataforma. Uno, que los datos nunca van a distinguir entre si uno es un funcionario público, si es un estudiante, si es un trabajador de una empresa o tiene su negocio propio. Segundo, que cuando gobierno y sociedad civil trabajan juntos, se vuelven uno solo. Y tal vez lo más importante y que guarda los principios de la transparencia y del portal de transparencia presupuestaria, que enaltece los principios de gobierno abierto, es que El cambio en el gobierno desde adentro se hace para mejorar los bienes y servicios que se proveen a la ciudadanía, pero junto con la ciudadanía. Por su atención, muchas gracias.
Mil gracias. Y ahora
Great to have you,
tenemos...
Jose Angel, here. And please don't leave without your prize.
If you haven't seen these close up, they've got the lovely colors
Yeah,
of
isn't
the
it?
OGP on them. Round of applause. Congratulations. Thank you. Yes, we put that back. And now it's my great pleasure to call up to the stage, oops, Maria Jarecamada.
Sure.
And while Maria's coming up, take your time. While Maria's coming up, I'll say why I'm particularly happy to have Maria up on the stage with me this evening, because Maria, who's now working at Espacio Público in Chile, started out working with Access Info in Madrid. Yes, quite a few. Yeah. You were almost my first employee, actually, at Access Info. So, Maria, you're going to tell us a little bit about how you got the very first lobbying regulation, Latin America's first lobbying regulation adopted in Chile, and how this is having an impact. So, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think that you imagine that Chile is no stranger in political scandals. As in many of your countries, we have our share in these cases. Scandals revealing the relation between money and politics, and undue influence between lobbyists and policymakers. We are now dealing with accusations to MPs and high public officers of receiving money for influence, and very important companies being investigated for influence peddling. As you can see in the slide, when lobbying is exercised in the dark, it's really difficult to tell the difference between a legitimate activity of advocacy and a crime as influence peddling. Since we passed our Lobby Act in 2014, it's a little bit easier to tell the difference between these two in Chile. It took us 11 years to pass our Lobby Act, compared to 3 years average in approving transparency or integrity-related issues, laws. What happened? Why 11 years? As a former MP and minister said during the discussion of this bill, lobbying killed the lobby many times. In this decade, there were 3 bills proposed. The 3 of them received several critics. One of them, and the most important, who are considered to be lobbyists, and which are their obligations and prohibitions. There was also major opposition from unions and some associations to be regulated as lobbyists, and they did a lot of lobbying against it. In January 2014, we were really close to approve this law, but government was soon to be changed, and some MPs of the opposition didn't want to give this triumph after 11 years to the former government. In civil society, we were also very critical with the 3rd bill that was being discussed, because the main focus was transparency in the meeting agendas rather than regulating the lobbying industry as in other countries like the US and Canada. We worked with the government and some MPs, and they passed some of our proposals. So then we started a big campaign, and this was really key to the approval of the law. We did a campaign in traditional media, in social media. We launched a special website. We also managed to make a video with two very known actors in Chile acting as a lobbyist and an MP, calling MPs to approve the law after 11 years. We had to make some compromises, but we had a pragmatic approach. It's better to have this law now than we can improve later, rather than not having a law at all again. This campaign was supported by a cross-section of society, thought leaders, NGOs, pro-transparency groups, think tanks, and I think that it really made a difference. Now, we have a law since March 2014, and we can highlight some aspects in these 2 years of implementation. We have transparency in meeting agenda, trips, and gifts of public officials. For the first time, we have all this information publicly available. There's also more equal access to public authorities. Now, a personal contact, it's not necessary to request a meeting. Any one of us can do it by a cell phone or a computer. Third, we have all this information in open data, and I don't think that I have to tell you why this is so big and important. OGP really helped us in two ways. First, in the commitment of the government of passing this law, and second, in its implementation. This bill is not perfect. We need to improve it. We need stronger sanctions. As you can see, we need to work in its enforcement. We need to close some loopholes. We need to regulate revolving doors. But it's a big and good first step. I hope that, again, with OGP support, we as civil society can work together pushing these reforms, and also it can help us to overcome some initial resistance from public leaders and public opinion. We've done this before. I know that we can do it again. Thank you.
No doubt, Maria, that this is a milestone in Latin American history in terms of the way we address politics and the influence of private sector and private interest in politics in the region. And I'm pretty happy that this happened within an OGP initiative. Now,
Absolutely.
we're going to turn once again to the regional awards, and now we're going to turn into a totally different region, which is the Asia region. And I'm very happy to introduce and ask to join me on the stage to Ondral Gombor. He is from the Democracy Education Initiative in Mongolia, and they they developed the service called Check My Service Initiative, and I want you to please provide a big round of applause to Ondral. Ondral, you already have a mic.
Yep.
That's great.
Yes.
So, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Ondral from Mongolia. As you might know, the Mongolia is well known as a land of blue sky. And also it's known for its extreme cold in winter, when the average temperature is low as minus 30 centigrade. And can you imagine a community where people walk 2 to 3 kilometers to get a water for their households in temperature of minus 30? And why? Because there is no water kiosk in their community. But I have good news, because we were able to change this situation in this community, And now, 335 residents of 95 households have a better access to water as a result of renovation of water kiosk in their community. Now they travel just few meters to get the water because it's very close. How did this happen? That was possible thanks to the Check My Service, which was initiated in 2012 by DEMO, Democracy Education Center, my organization. And what is this Check My Service? Check My Service is the initiative which monitors the transparency and accessibility of public services through the community scorecard tool. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with this tool. For short, this is community-based monitoring tool that demands accountability and responsiveness from service providers and empowers the service users. And since 2012, in 4 years, our organization was able to monitor 84 public services. In OGP language, we were able to deliver 84 commitments. And of course, now you will ask, so what? What have been the results of this monitoring of these 84 commitments or public services? Well, we have tracked our records and improvements, and we have now 49 cases of improvements in public services. And I don't have much time to take you all through all these improvements. Let me just share some few of them. Check My Waste Disposal. In one community, non-apartment based, the citizens, the residents of this community, were unable to get out the trash because the garbage trucks didn't follow the published schedule. But now, 335 residents of 95 households, they don't worry about the garbage collection because the company in charge of garbage collection installed the waste bins, as you see in the green one, in the household fences, and they collect the garbage according to an approved schedule. The next, Check My Electricity. In another 3 communities, 140 households now have access to electricity as a result of installing electricity transmission poles. Before this intervention, these people used candles and tapped their electricity to their neighbors, for which they had to pay informal fees. The next, Check My Information. We were able to increase the access to information for residents of 28 communities. We say it in Mongolian, horos, with around the population of 300,000 people. So that in these 28 communities were installed, in these offices were installed LCD touchscreens, as you see from the screen, that the people, residents, just come and can check online all the public services or registration documents they wish. For instance, just have an application form for new ID or passport. And the last, Check My Hospital. We were also able to increase the access to health services in one district-level healthcare center by installing a ticket dispensing machine. By the placement of this ticket machine at this care center, it was allowed the customers to save time. Because these people were very complained about the bad management of medical appointments, which results in a long waiting hours or need to go to get in the morning, 5 a.m., to get a queue. And Now we don't stop it, our activity. We will continue it. Recently, our organization is working on development of mobile application on Check My Service, and also started recently so-called Check My Parliament project to endorse the declaration of parliamentary openness and to assess the performance of Mongolia's parliament. And I would like to end with the quote of Bill Rogers, American humorist and actor. "I don't make jokes. I just watch the government and report the facts." Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Undral. I think, put yourself in the middle here. I love the way that you linked civic
Thank you,
tech,
very
access to
beautiful.
information, and solving real practical problems.
Rachel, please picture.
Pictures. Rachel, wake up.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh,
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, we're coming back from cold Mongolia to cold Paris. So we thought we'd give you a bit of a fireside chat. You just have to imagine the fire, okay? And we're going to have a discussion between, we're very privileged to have on the stage, Costa Rican Vice Minister Ana Gabriel Zuniga Aponte, and from the Independent Reporting Mechanism, the people who really check that the OGP commitments and the process is being followed, the IRM mechanism, we've got Israel Aragon. Are you in the house? Coming up onto the stage. And this debate is going to be moderated by Hazel Feigenblatt. Hazel,
Come here.
coming in.
Full of Costa Rican.
Right, wonderful. So
Gracias.
come and take a seat and hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bueno, primero que todo, la aclaración de que este panel va a ser en español porque la viceministra quiere que el video se transmita en las comunidades indígenas sobre las que trata este caso, entonces español es la mejor alternativa. Este es un caso de estudio en el que Israel y yo trabajamos juntos y que fue liderado desde la oficina de la viceministra, y básicamente cuenta la historia de cómo un grupo de indígenas logró utilizar OGP para lograr resultados que fueron, por una parte, algunos muy puntuales sobre la calidad de los servicios públicos en las comunidades, y otro mucho más transformativo que vamos a ver dentro de un rato. Como contexto, en Costa Rica la comunidad indígena es sumamente pequeña, es menos del 2% de la población, están ubicados en reservas en lugares muy alejados, lo cual ha ayudado a que sean sumamente excluidos históricamente de las decisiones que afectan sus propias comunidades, a pesar de que por ley tienen cierta autonomía que no han podido ejercer. Para darles un ejemplo, aunque en Costa Rica es un país que tiene un nivel de alfabetismo de casi el 100%, este es un 10% menor en el caso de los indígenas. Algunos de los grupos indígenas solo lograron empezar a votar, a ejercer el derecho del voto hasta en los años 90, lo cual da una idea de la situación en la que viven en un país que es tradicionalmente sumamente democrático como es Costa Rica. Entonces, pues entramos con esto en los ejemplos. Tal vez Israel, podemos empezar contigo. Danos tal vez ejemplos de los resultados que lograron los indígenas, por ejemplo, mejores escuelas o poder recibir becas y superar algunas de las trabas administrativas y los retos tan únicos en cuando han tratado de comunicarse con el gobierno, dada la cosmovisión tan diferente que tienen ellos y la que tienen los funcionarios.
Gracias, Hazel. Hay varios ejemplos, la verdad, bastante interesantes y coloridos, si se quiere, al respecto. Otra de las características que mencionabas de esta población indígena es que también es uno de los segmentos de la población que está particularmente afectado por la pobreza. De acuerdo al último censo del país, 7 de cada 10 hogares de ellos tienen al menos una necesidad básica insatisfecha. Eso hace que sean sujetos de muchas de las ayudas o colaboraciones del gobierno. Sin embargo, a veces estas ayudas no son tan efectivas, en parte por un tema de falta de participación, de involucrarlos a ellos en la toma de decisiones que tienen que ver con las mismas iniciativas para ayudarlos a ellos. Entonces, una de estas ayudas que reciben es el bono de vivienda. El gobierno les ayuda en construirles una casa, pero con el paso de los años se vio que en realidad no usaban las casas. En realidad, el único cambio que estaba generando estos bonos de vivienda es que ellos se convirtieran en vecinos de sus propias casas. ¿Por qué? Porque lo que hacían es que movían el rancho en que vivían, en algún lugar de la montaña, al lado de la casa que construyeron con el bono de vivienda. Y la usaban para lo que fuera. Si podían, la alquilaban, pero por lo remoto de muchas áreas eso no era fácil. Entonces, las casas terminaban siendo bodegas donde ellos guardaban cosas o donde tendían la ropa. Y la razón por las que no la usaban era por aspectos como que no concebían que el baño estuviese dentro de la casa. Dentro de su cosmovisión, el baño no puede estar dentro de la casa. Simplemente no les parecía lógico. O el tema del patio también, que para ellos es sumamente importante. Es la primera escuela de sus niños, donde los padres les enseñan cómo funciona la agricultura, las fases de la luna y varias cosas. Y ellos, de hecho, a las casas que recibían les llamaban las cajas de fósforos. Gracias a el proceso de participación que se les involucró en el desarrollo de los proyectos de las casas, pues se trabajó un diseño más adecuado a su cosmovisión y en otros materiales como la madera, por ejemplo. Entonces, es un impacto interesante. Y el otro, rápidamente, que mencionabas, tiene que ver con las ayudas que forman parte de las becas que se les estaban dando para asistir para que los niños asistieran a la escuela. No era posible darles estas ayudas financieras porque, de acuerdo a cómo estaba establecido el marco legal, la institución que da las ayudas necesita que esa ayuda se dé a un servicio de transporte público que esté aprobado por la Autoridad Nacional de Servicios Públicos. Y el transporte que usan estos niños, pues, es el primer chapulín que pasen, que encuentren.
Tengo aquí exactamente una de las comunidades para ir a la escuela todos los días. Los niños estos tienen que ir 20 minutos en caballo, luego 30 minutos en algún tractor o algún otro camión de carga que encuentren, luego 40 minutos en un bote por agua y finalmente llegan y tienen que caminar 1 kilómetro más para llegar a la escuela y luego regresar otra vez. Como son los medios de transporte menos convencionales que se imaginan, no tenían tarifa reconocida y no podían ellos hacer que les valiera para que les dieran esas ayudas. Y eso fue algo de lo que se logró con el diálogo en el marco de OGP.
Sí, exactamente. Y este pequeño grupo indígena empezó a trabajar para medir el costo de ese fragmento y fue ese trabajo conjunto el que permitió que se dieran las ayudas del gobierno.
Gracias, Israel. Luego, ese es uno de varios ejemplos que hay, digamos, de logros más pequeños, más inmediatos. Pero quizá el logro más transformador que ha tenido OGP en este marco, en este plan de acción, ha sido el tema de la representación, que como les decía, ellos han sido excluidos por décadas. Algo que la viceministra aquí ha llamado una deuda histórica, que con el proceso de OGP se ha empezado finalmente después de tanto tiempo a resolver. Entonces podemos verlo tal vez desde dos aspectos. Uno, el proceso. Tal vez había cierto diálogo ya con un grupo, no todos los territorios indígenas, pero un grupo de ellos que estaba en proceso, pero no estaba avanzando tan rápido. Y a partir de su inclusión como un compromiso, como un hito en OGP, cambió un poco. ¿Qué diferencia hizo OGP para que se lograra esto?
Sí, bueno, para explicarles y que puedan comprender un poco en qué consiste, este es un proceso de diálogo que le denominamos el Festival Cultural Dialogando por el Buen Vivir, donde reunimos a 9 territorios indígenas de Talamanca, que es un cantón en el Caribe sur de nuestro país, y de Turrialba también. Y entonces son 2 pueblos indígenas, Bribri y Cabécar, distribuidos en estos 9 territorios, que tenían precisamente una agenda. Pero en el momento en el que la presidencia, dado que es en presidencia donde llevamos la agenda de gobierno abierto, tomamos la decisión de incorporar el seguimiento y monitoreo de este diálogo entre los compromisos de nuestro plan de acción ante la Alianza para el Gobierno Abierto, logramos no solo establecer mayor vinculancia y compromiso de las instituciones al ser asumidos de presidencia, sino que una mayor responsabilidad por la fiscalización que iba a tener el proceso. Entonces aquí es donde logramos comprobar que con esta perspectiva del gobierno abierto y el hecho de vernos aún con muchísima más presión para rendir cuentas es que tiene éxito un proceso, porque en el momento que tenés un grupo indígena que además está siendo apoyado por entidades externas en la fiscalización del proceso y además acompañado por una estructura interinstitucional, fluyó muchísimo más el proceso. Aquí no requerimos de ni una sola reforma jurídica, de nada. Es mera buena voluntad política y mero interés de articular de manera conjunta y de no tener miedo a un diálogo con una población que históricamente no habíamos estado escuchando, que además fue muy complejo tratar de retomar esas confianzas porque había habido un Estado fallido para ellos, porque el Estado no había logrado llegar con la profundidad y la intensidad que requería. Entonces, el proceso de gobierno abierto y el enfoque con el que hemos venido trabajando con los pueblos indígenas ha permitido no solo regenerar confianza, sino visibilizar una población en la producción conjunta y en la co-creación de políticas públicas, que es también otro de los principios, estándares y banderas de la Alianza para el Gobierno Abierto.
Perfecto. Y luego, bueno, ¿por qué decía yo que uno de los logros ha sido transformativo? Como hablaba de la deuda histórica, Costa Rica firmó un convenio internacional hace 23 años, dentro del cual se comprometía a crear un mecanismo de consulta para que cualquier decisión que afectara a estos pueblos o a estas comunidades fuera consultada primero con ellos. Han pasado 23 años y todavía no se ha implementado ese mecanismo. Cuando se han hecho intentos de hacer consulta ha sido más como da la impresión de que se está haciendo sin realmente consultarles. Entonces, a pesar de que es una obligación internacional, es algo que, aunque ellos han estado tratando de lograr por muchos años, casi que una generación entera de líderes indígenas no había logrado mayor avance. Dentro del marco de OGP y a raíz del diálogo que se incluyó ahí, se empezó entonces a hacer un mecanismo de consulta con los 24 territorios sobre cómo debería ser este mecanismo ya permanente de consulta que se puede utilizar para cualquier tipo de tema que afecte sus comunidades. Y eso es algo que pues una vez que esté ya en firme, va a ser un logro histórico para estas comunidades. Y en ese sentido, entonces, sería interesante que nos cuente cómo ha sido ese proceso de ir a consultar, en algunas veces en helicóptero, en distancias muy, muy largas, la consulta con ellos y también cómo va a ser este mecanismo de consulta.
También me permito establecer que este proceso de elaboración de un mecanismo de consulta no lo incluimos en el Plan de Acción de Gobierno Abierto, pero sí está fundamentado en los principios de gobierno abierto y en la declaratoria de interés público de los planes de acción de nuestro país que hemos hecho. Entonces, esta es otra justificación perfecta para evidenciar que la participación ciudadana es exitosa. Y este proceso de diálogo de RIPCA que les comentábamos anteriormente, que sí está en el plan de acción, nos permitió demostrarle a las instituciones que consultar de manera libre, previa, informada y dialogar con los pueblos indígenas no es un atraso burocrático o no es un atraso en los tiempos. Todo lo contrario. Precisamente al día de hoy teníamos estas dificultades con las becas y este poco éxito en los bonos de vivienda porque no habíamos dialogado antes. ¿Cuánto dinero se hubiera ahorrado el Estado de Costa Rica si hubiera consultado de manera libre, previa, informada todas estas políticas públicas? Que eso también es gobierno abierto en el tema de hacer más eficiente el uso de los recursos. Y por eso, habiendo tenido y demostrado que no es nada complejo o imposible tener este intercambio cultural con los pueblos indígenas y además con una reforma reciente en nuestra constitución política que declara a Costa Rica como Estado pluriétnico y multicultural, iniciamos este proceso, como bien lo señalaba Hazel, con 23 años de atraso y logramos darnos cuenta el gran recibimiento positivo que hemos tenido prácticamente en los 24 territorios. Lo más hermoso del proceso es ponernos a nosotras, funcionarias de instituciones públicas, a hacer estos recorridos que Hazel nos contaba nosotras, para entender cuál es su realidad. Porque al final de cuentas el gobierno abierto no lo es tal si no logra ponerse en los zapatos de los ciudadanos y ciudadanas que están en las situaciones más complejas y más vulnerables. Y en ese sentido para nosotros ha sido sumamente enriquecedor y debo decirlo, no hay nadie que tenga más clara la agenda política que los pueblos indígenas de nuestro país. Y lo tienen sumamente claro, saben lo que quieren, saben para qué lo quieren y saben la cantidad de problemas que nos habríamos ahorrado de manera conjunta si este diálogo intercultural se hubiera dado antes. Ha sido complicado, no puedo decir que ha sido sumamente sencillo, realmente poder recomponer confianzas que no habían existido nunca, siendo que además pues, nuestros pueblos indígenas tienen una historia de conquista y colonización nada feliz. No ha sido sencillo, pero no ha sido imposible. Naturalmente hemos cometido errores en el proceso y se seguirán cometiendo porque de hecho a nivel de América Latina nunca se ha co-creado un mecanismo de consulta. Siempre ha sucedido que lo producen en un escritorio y luego le preguntan si les gusta o no. Nosotros lo estamos co-creando. La propuesta de mecanismo va a estar construida con insumos de gobierno, con insumos de los pueblos indígenas, donde además Naciones Unidas y nuestro ombudsman han sido observadores del proceso. Entonces realmente yo creo que este es un ejemplo interesante, muy retador, insisto que no es sencillo, pero no es imposible, pero es muy enriquecedor y evidencia que la participación ciudadana solo trae cosas positivas en el fortalecimiento de la democracia y si lo queremos ver más técnica y calculadoramente, hasta en la eficiencia de los servicios públicos y del gasto público, porque insisto, si este diálogo se hubiera dado antes, no habríamos tenido todas estas deficiencias en la ejecución de política social en favor de los pueblos indígenas.
Gracias. Bueno, tenemos tiempo limitado, así que voy a cerrar, pero quiero nada más hacer llamar la atención a un hecho, y es que este compromiso fue sumamente general. No había un detalle específico de todas las tareas que se iban a hacer. A pesar de eso, se lograron resultados de diferentes tipos, lo cual muestra que a veces no es tanto el que se pone en el papel, sino al final de cuentas que se hace en la práctica. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias por la conversación muy interesante. Now, I'm going to take the chair's away, I think. We're going to move to Europe now, and we're going to hear from the regional award winner from Europe, who comes from the Netherlands, Ariane El-Fased. Would you like to come up onto the stage, please? And you're from the Open State Foundation and going to talk about open spending, right? Okay, over to you, Ariane.
Hello. This is Jaap. Jaap, he lives in the north of the Netherlands. And Jaap owns a cafe near a bridge. The municipality takes care of the bridge. And Jaap believes that he can do the same, but he doesn't know how much the municipality spends on it. And he believes that he can actually do it less. But Jaap finds it hard to find the information. Now, a couple of years ago, we were sitting with the local district of Amsterdam, and they showed us this Excel sheet, and they told us that they were obliged to send this Excel file to the Central Bureau of Statistics every 3 months. And in this file, it contains the budget and the spending per quarter. So every quarter, they send this file. Now, the easiest thing to do for us would go to the Central Bureau of Statistics and ask for the data. But the data belongs to each and every single municipality in the Netherlands, and we have 400 of them. And each of them decides by their own in what, if, and how they publish their financial records. So we took the data from the city of Amsterdam. We asked the city, the other districts of the city to give us the files. We built a website in which we not only could compare the budget with the spending, but we could also compare the spending with the other districts. But now we had to ask 400 different municipalities in the Netherlands for the data. And this is what we did. So we went to the municipality, asked the civil servant for the data, and if the civil servant declined, we would go to the alderman, and if the alderman declined, we would go to the municipal council. And with the help of local journalists, in many municipal councils, motions were tabled and questions were raised. Within a year, we got the data from 200 municipalities, and we collected thousands of files, creating millions of data points. Then we went back to the Central Bureau of Statistics, now together with the Ministry of Interior. and show them that the vast majority of Dutch municipalities are willing to give these files and make them public. So now the Central Bureau of Statistics had the case that they could open up sustainably this data. So from that time, we have now sustainably, structurally, data opened from each and every local government in the Netherlands, each of the local and regional authorities, and around 129 common arrangements. And this data is being produced every quarter per year. Now, any municipal council member can throughout the year follow how his municipality is doing and find the financial space for political change. Civil servants can now benchmark their own data with the data of other local governments. Journalists can have easy access to timely and comparable data and creating news stories. And Jaap, like other citizens, can now challenge their own local government and find how much their own local government is spending on various topics, like the maintenance of this bridge. And Jaap now believes he can do the maintenance of the bridge for 1/3 of the amount spent by the municipality. Now, what we learned was that you need political understanding of how decisions are being made. And you need to find the right intervention to influence that political decision-making. What helped was that we got open spending in the National Action Plan of the Netherlands, which created political support for civil servants to collaborate with us. But the most important thing is that with a combination of political and technical knowledge and a strong community, anyone can change local government. Thank you.
Get the Under Time Award as well.
We handle the word, actually.
Which is the award? Netherlands, open spending. I'm not sure whose turn it is, but come and stand in the middle so we do this properly. There you are. Congratulations, Ariane. Now for the cameras. Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
Very much. Thank you so much, Ariane. We always say that open data and participation have the potential to change people's lives, no? But
we do say that.
Yeah, we do say that in OGP a lot.
We have to prove it, too.
Yeah, we had to prove it, and now we have actually a concrete example that it has that potential. I'm going to call here Carlo Amati and Simona De Luca from the Presidency of the Council of Ministers in Italy, because they are going to tell us and share with us a story of how top-down open data initiatives are actually meeting bottom-up participation and by that changing people's lives. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. And thanks to the OGP for inviting us and to the French government for hosting this summit. Italy is one of the European countries with the largest regional disparities. The per capita GDP of the richest regions in the north is almost more than twice as much as that of the poorest regions in the south. Cohesion policy has the objective of reducing these gaps, and it invests approximately 100 billion euros of national and European funds over 7-year programming cycles in order to support job creation, business competitiveness, economic growth, sustainable development, and eventually to improve citizens' quality of life.
And Open Coesione was launched in 2012 in response to the slow pace in the implementation of cohesion policies, low absorption rate of funds, and targets not being met. Open Coesione leverages on the 3 dimensions of open government, and it promotes an involvement of citizens, government, businesses, as well as researchers and the media, in order to obtain more evidence in the use of funds.
Open Coesione is centered on its open data portal. Users can find out individual information on finance projects, how much they cost, where they are located, who the recipients of the funds are, and much more. They can either download open data or surf through interactive diagrams on the portal. Data is timely updated every 2 months, so users can follow the implementation of projects, and they can do it on a regular basis. But they can also press forward and contribute to the achievement of project objectives by interacting with those entities in charge of local projects.
And that's exactly what Moniton has been doing since 2013. Moniton is a monitoring marathon, and it is an independent initiative for civic monitoring. Citizens have the opportunity to map out projects funded by cohesion policies in their town, in their area, and select a team or whatever, and then go on the spot to see what exactly the project is about and how its implementation is going on. And all the evidence is uploaded on a common platform, and it is available to everyone.
In order to promote data reuse and civicness among young people, Open Coesione has also launched a specific school initiative. Almost 10,000 students have been participating so far in these innovative educational projects, where open data, public awareness, and responsible use of social media are used to foster civic monitoring on public funding. Students work side by side with NGOs, field experts, and local European information centers to interact with local authorities who are in charge of projects, and they contribute to solve the implementation of projects.
But let's jump back to 2011, when Italy joined the OGP, and open government was still quite a novel in our country. Our initiative was included in the first Italian action plan, and it had the ability to deliver prompt results in terms of openness, transparency, and participation. In 2014, Open Coesione was honored by a silver award in the first edition of the OGP Awards. And it strengthens the evidence of results and the credibility of the partnership, its weaknesses, the sustainability in long term.
Today, Open Coesione is an open government ecosystem made of open data producers and consumers of government proactive initiatives like the Open Coesione School Initiative, who is fostering new generation of engaged citizens who are really getting addicted to civic monitoring. But there's also civic tech initiatives like Moniton and policymakers in the central and local governments. Now, the real challenge is to keep it running, to improve the quality of the data, and to have new initiatives develop around it. This is an open challenge, as it requires human and financial resources that public administration often struggle to find. Despite the recent major reform in the national governance of cohesion policy, Open Coesione today still has to rely on external financial support, and it doesn't have yet a sufficient amount of permanent dedicated staff for it to flourish.
Anyway, after 5 years, the Open Coesione initiative is still alive, and we are working on it. And Italy, in the third action plan, presented more than 30 commitments and across all the different OGP values. And among them, there is the Open Coesione 2.0, which includes a new bilingual version of the portal and new models for engagement at the local level in order to achieve the objective of providing better services and improving the quality of life of citizens and their families. So,
arrivederci su Open Coesione.
Grazie mille, grazie mille.
Grazie.
Thank you very much indeed. I love the Open Cohesion project. I hope it does survive, and I think we need it all across Europe.
All yours, all yours.
All still mine. Okay, wonderful. So finally, last but not least, we're going to hear from our regional winner for Africa, Dalitso Kubalasa. Are you around? Come up to the stage quickly because we're running behind schedule. We've got to keep up the momentum now. You brought your fans with you, Dalitso. Going to talk from the Malawi Economic Justice Network, and you're going to talk about the construction sector transparency initiative. Over to you. Thanks very much. Here we go.
Thank you very much. It's such a great honor from Africa, from Malawi. So welcome to Africa. And let's walk through Malawi together. Ours is about the Construction Sector Transparency Initiative and the belief that we have
Why will be a presentation without any last-minute problems? You guys can help us a little bit?
Is the big green one?
Yeah.
Okay. I think now it will work.
There you are. Great.
Great. It will make it even more exciting for the story from Malawi and Africa.
Sure.
We have a very strong belief that accountable governance, transparency, and accountability are a prerequisite for positive transformation. And this is the story that we believe in, the story that we are experiencing in Malawi, and I'm sure in the rest of Africa, my colleagues who attest to that. And this is the story that we continue to build our resolve around. Now, Malawi is a very exciting place to be. It's a very small country, only 118,000, approximately square kilometers, with a population of about 17.2 million. It's a developing country. We are working very hard to get there. At least we should be a developed country one of these days. And since we are still developing, we only have a per capita GDP of around $381, which is pretty low, but we remain hopeful. It's called normally as the warm heart of Africa. I hope you can feel the warmth through me. Malawi is one of those countries, I think, that is facing a few challenges, but we believe in looking at these challenges as opportunities for doing better. One of those challenges is about the infrastructure development. And we look at infrastructure development as one of the critical components of development. If we get it right with infrastructure development, a lot of other things will be okay. And this is pretty much the story that the construction sector transparency in Malawi revolves around. There's been a rather depressing narrative. Looking at infrastructure development is not cheap. You need to invest. And these are the resources that we don't have a luxury of having a lot of them, which means when we invest in a road, or we invest in a school, or we invest in a health center, you name it, all those examples, it means it's a huge sacrifice. So we are, foregoing a lot of other luxuries that we could have had with the very same investment. Now, this is where the Cost Malawi initiative is coming in, because we believe this investment, it needs to yield the best result that we're supposed to. We need to get the best value for the money. So the narrative that we've had, it's been pointing in the direction of it's almost impossible to get a construction sector that is efficient, where you have, a project designed to be implemented or constructed in a year, and then it's almost impossible to finish it in a year, because of the things that we see, the experiences that we've been having. And because of these time overruns, we've been seeing cost overruns. And because of the cost overruns, we've been seeing a huge drain of resources, largely through maybe misprocurement, through corruption, you name it. So this is the narrative that the Coast Malawi initiative is seeking to reverse and change. As you can see, we believe again that construction sector transparency is quite transformative. If we have transparency and accountability in the construction sector, which is the most binding constraint for development, we will see a lot of transformation. And this transformation is what we've experienced and what we continue to see. As you can see, a bridge, without a bridge, a lot of people have problems to get to from one point to the other. Some of them are smallholder farmers. Some of them are small-scale business people. As you can see, because the bridge was collapsing there, this gentleman has had to carry his bicycle on his head because he wants to cross. Now, with the very same bridge constructed through some of these initiatives that we are really following up on these investments, you see this gentleman now, he's cycling and is able to carry his produce to access a market. This is quite transformative in many ways that I can, maybe I can't talk about all of it now. You look at the school, if we build a substandard structure, there are a lot of consequences that will be faced. If we maintain our schools, pretty well with whatever investments that we have, we'll end up again having a lot of the learning outcome that we expect to see. And this is a whole generation of a country like Malawi that is really being safeguarded, to be a very critical part of the development that we want to see. So construction sector transparency is quite transformative. And this is what we're experiencing, and this is what we are seeing. And this is what we are believing in. If we have a very good road, you can see a very bad road has a lot of consequences. It's raining now in Malawi. You literally know that in some parts, and a lot more parts of the country, they are inaccessible because once it rains, it's cut off. But these are some of the things that we continue to see as part of the development. Now, there's been a huge lesson that we've had in our narrative for the construction sector transparency. And this is about the political commitment and the technical commitment. And this is where we are seeing the Coast Malawi initiative with the multi-stakeholder group, the collaboration, government, civil society, private sector. And we have a champion in the Vice President of the Republic of Malawi who is very passionate about doing business unusual. And he's also a chair of the Public Service Reform Commission. So he's been a very huge driving factor for the change that we want to see through the transparency. And this is a plus, and I think we can get so much more impact. Finally, it's a resolve that we continue to have, and we believe the rest of Africa and the rest of the world will have, that citizen empowerment is extremely critical and is quite key to our success. I thank you for enjoying the story about Africa and Malawi in particular. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Delitu. That was really great. Thanks a lot. You're very well deserved award.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
a lot.
Delitu. Congratulations. And
Once
thank
again,
you once again
congratulations.
to all, from me and Alejandro, to all the award winners tonight, and for the others who came and told their story. I think if there's a takeaway, we've heard about the collaboration between government and civil society. That's clearly important. That's what OGP is all about. But it also comes down to individuals with at least two qualities, with vision and with perseverance. And that's what's so important. Thanks to all of you for persevering through this fantastic session and the whole event. And a warm round of applause to the award winners.
Of course.
Yeah? Thanks.
All right, bring it on.